Hello, darlings. It is I, Loki. Today's episode will focus on me. You may have already watched some rubbish about Norse mythology and Eddas or some bollocks like that, but enough with that prattling. Let's get to the good, and by good I mean deliciously bad stuff, starring your one and only favourite trickster god. This is Loki's Corner. No, this is Speaker's Corner, for God's sake. Well, not you. Anyway, hello. This is Speaker's Corner, and I am your host, Tim Byron. Do I hear something? Valhalla calling? Pish posh, moving on. Last episode, we went into a very basic rundown on Norse mythology and the Eddas, from which we now have a transcribed form of some of those stories. It was quite edifying. Eddas, edifiers. Bother. Right, we've discussed the Eddas and how grim, dreary, and frankly ghastly the Norse myths can be, thanks to the recent release of a trailer for one of those streaming platforms. Hello, yes, Loki here, and I do have a new show on one of those applications you mortals enjoy. I'm not specifically on here to promote it, but why the bloody hell not? Watch it, don't watch it, what do I care? I'm a bloody god, and you're not. Right, well, be a bit uptight, that one, which is not too far off from his mythological counterpart. Today's episode will focus not on the comic book character Loki that formed the basis of that show and his appearances in certain films, but the mythological trickster that inspired that character. First things first, Loki is, but is also not, a member of the Norse pantheon, that collective of gods that reigned over humans. There's, of course, Odin, who is the king of the Norse gods, the avatar of wisdom and battle, but also a mopey, sad sod in his own right. I will eventually get into that character's personalities and stories, but maybe not for some time. It would be interesting to compare him with his alleged Greek counterpart, Zeus, who has his own seriously messed up and sordid backstory. Not that I would know anything about that. The might of Zeus bows to no one. Quite simply a slight lapse into a past life, if you will. Right, Loki is a member of the Norse pantheon, which also goes by the name Aesir, but not because he was not even a god per se, but the son of a giant. That wily king of the gods, Odin, seemed to have a habit of inviting Loki to things. Wherever Loki went, invited or not, trouble followed, although, frankly, one could really attribute that more to Odin and Thor than Loki. But all of them were, how do I put this, rabble-rousers, to put it kindly, I suppose. Loki really liked to involve the gods, continuously in difficulties and dangers, but he was allowed to come freely to Asgard because, well, it isn't really clear, actually. I suppose Odin took a fancy to this chap Loki, who was the son of Farboti, a giant from Jotunheimer. Loki is a cunning trickster who had the ability to change both his shape and his sex. He joined the gods of Aesir due to his, very occasionally clever ideas. He was a companion of Odin, and because Loki was much more intelligent than all the gods combined, and swore brotherhood to Odin, so Odin was sort of his brother, and as Loki became a god, also Loki's father. So in a sense, Loki was both Thor's uncle and his brother. Oh, what's that? A complicated familial relationship? In mythology? How could that ever be? At least this one isn't incestuous. He generally appears as Odin's foster son, and mostly outsmarts Thor and the other gods, but only when he has great ideas. Scratch that. Thor was really dim, so anything Loki did outwitted his mental prowess. Loki's, let's call them less clever ideas, of which there are many, often backfired, causing the Aesir a lot of blushes. He's sort of like he's like Kramer from Seinfeld, availing himself of feasts uninvited and usually causing a mess, imbibing of the drink whenever he fancied. If there's anything we know about mythology, it's that alcohol is rarely, if ever, inspiring of good or cogent ideas. How did he get away with all this trouble causing? He was Odin's brother, for lack of a better word, as it is the closest description. For now, anyway, because Odin had sworn brotherhood with Loki. Why did Loki get this characterization as a trickster? Well, hello, darlings. Oh, blimey, it seems like it's going to be one of those episodes, is it? Oh, darling, you are impugning my character. Of course, I am going to provide the most ample, the greatest defense imaginable before you go off besmirching my fair, my most magnificent and hallowed of names. I am not a, quote, trickster, unquote. I am simply far cleverer. Is that a word? Anyway, yes, I am much cleverer than you, Lord, and quite frankly misunderstood. Trickster, rogue, joker. Characterize me how you will, but at least hear my side of the story before you judge me so harshly and rashly. Fine, then. Have at it, my non-trickster deity, sir. Thank you. See, would a trickster be grateful? Now, where was he? Ah, yes, he was going to tell you about the time I got rid of that wanker Balder. You see, Balder was the most beloved of the gods, honestly. What did he really have except good looks? Well, clever and just. God, why would anyone like that? He was essentially perfect, except he wasn't, because I could see through him. He was Odin's son from his wife Frigga, who was the queen of the gods herself, the goddess that embodied motherhood and fertility. So, you know, rather a big deal in the frigid tundra of our origins. Anyway, Balder was a strapping bloke that no one could harm. The other gods would have fun by throwing all manner of stuff at him to harm him, but no one ever could. Well, I took that as a personal insult, because what is the bloody point of being a part of a fatalistic religion/cult if one could not die? What's he going to do? Face Fenrir and not die? By the way, Fenrir is the giant wolf that will swallow the sun or moon at Ragnarok, and my son. The son I had with the giantess Angerboda, whose name translates to grief-bringer, but that's neither here nor there. We were talking about Balder being all perfect. Balder was being a proper wuss one night, dreaming some bad things, foretelling some terrible suffering upon him because he was such a drama queen. Frigga, that doting and clingy mother of his, heard about poor Whittle Balder's so sad dreams. She decided that she would protect him from the least chance of danger. Can't have our precious Balder having a boo-boo, can we? Even though everyone was going to die at Ragnarok, so what's the bloody point? Anyway, Frida went through the world and exacted an oath from everything, all things with and without life, never to do Whittle Balder any harm. However, my swear bro Odin still feared, because as hardcore as he may appear to be, he's really a big softy and quite, well, emo. Anyway, he rode down to the world of the dead, Niflheim, where he found the dwelling of Hela, or Hel. In other words, Daddy had to go down to hell itself to protect his big baby of a son that everyone loved. A wise woman had prophesied to Odin that Balder would die one day, but Frigga's imploring of invincibility to everything in existence for her Whittle Balderkins led everyone else to believe that Balder was invincible, which is when they came up with this most wonderful game of chucking all they could at him. Of course, they all failed because I had a plan in place, because, well, I'm me. Oh, yes, such a clever plan, such a very, very clever plan. Frigga had this habit of only being around Valkyries, so I assumed that she would be more open to me if I appeared to her as a woman, which I did. The clever never ends with me, does it? Even though she talked to both men and women anyway, so there wasn't really much of a point in your going in drag now, was there? Hush you. I'm telling the story, and yes, I am a thespian at heart, and needed to immerse myself fully in the role. Anyway, before that rude interruption, I was saying how I had to cajoled Frigg into speaking with me. Oh, she was proper pleased with herself, because I barely asked her how she made Balder invincible when she pointed out to me all the things with whom she had pleaded for his immunity. Most people and gods, well, all of them, would have missed it. But I caught the moment in which she passed by the mistletoe and didn't specify that particular item, even after we had passed by swords, axes, spears, arrows, all these dangerous weapons, plants and animals. I had all the info I needed at that point. So I said my proper tatars to the old bird and crafted my plan. Can you guess what that was? I was pining for some mistletoe, which in the dreary north is not difficult to find, mark you. I procured some quite easily and readily, of course, but well, it wouldn't really do if I were to off Balder myself, would it? There was a blind chap by the name of Hod, who was also Balder's brother, and I enlisted him in this snare to get that infallible god. Who would ever suspect a blind old god with some pithy, weak mistletoe as a weapon? Hod threw the mistletoe with all his strength that wasn't able to get halfway to Balder, but I helped, of course, guided to strike at Balder's heart, and he died instantly. Yes, well, that is the tale, and so the infallible and favourite of all gods died to a mere mistletoe that his blind brother had chucked at him. What irony, eh? Oh, darling, darling, Balder's story doesn't end there, you know. I had more to do with his suffering. Fine, continue with your schadenfreude. You'll recall that Odin went to hell for his precious little Baldikins, and one of these wanker Aesir named Hermod went down there to plead for his soul. Why does everyone love him so? Ugh. Hermod asked for Balder's soul, and Hela, the goddess of death and ruler in charge of hell, and I should mention my daughter, said that Balder could return if everything in existence truly lamented his passing. Now, the message got around pretty quickly, and so everything was crying, like full-on weeping for him, which was exactly as Hela wanted, with one large, and I mean literally large in this case, as a giantess refused to shed a single tear for Balder. Delicious, no? But you paid for that, didn't you? Oh, yes. Odin and Frigg blamed me because they knew I despised their precious little Balder, so I had to bear the brunt of their and all the other gods' wrath for whatever reason. Me? Take the blame? Absolute bloody nonsense. Do you know what they did to me? They bound me in a cave upon a boulder. A bloody boulder! There a snake would drip its poison on my head daily, and that was indescribable pain. Worse than having to help out Thor or listen to anyone keep rhapsodizing about that sodding perfect know-it-all Balder. I was a regular Prometheus. My turn to interrupt now, I think. That should be a focus of a future episode, I think. Excuse me. I was talking about my unrelenting anguish and suffering. Oh, the pain I endured in that cave. Thankfully, my wife, Sigyn, gave your favourite trickster god a hand and a cup as she would collect the poison in that goblet. However, the slightest drop from that poison in the cup on my head would cause me such pain that the earth would convulse. So you see, it is I that truly suffered for Baldur's death. Yes, truly, truly, truly. All right, that's enough out of you. You can bugger off and trick somebody else. Loki, enough of this episode. Be sure, as always, to like, share, comment, subscribe to this video and channel. Feel free to question me about anything you want, as I always check those and welcome your feedback. Ta-ta, darlings. Pip, pip, cheerio, and here's looking at you, kid. Hey, those are my lines. Well, you heard the man. God, whatever. Until next time, cheerio.